Hello and welcome to another exciting Blender tutorial. What we're going to take a look at is how to make a volcano using procedural shaders. Let's get started. Okay, so the idea today is to talk about how to use UVs to manipulate procedural shaders so you can create cool effects. And today's effect we're going to create is some streams of lava flowing out of a volcano. And we'll create a complete image using that technique and do some cool stuff. So hope you're excited. Let's jump straight into it. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and delete everything out of my scene. And I'm going to start off by creating a plane. So I'm going to Shift A, plane. Now I'm going to go into edit mode with this plane. And I'm going to type F3 and type in subdivide. And I'm going to turn up subdivisions all the way to 10. In fact, I might go all the way up to 50. Let's really crank it up. And I'll come out of edit mode. I'll scale this up a little bit further. This is going to be the basis of our volcano. Now, I'll just grab a vertex somewhere in the center, right about here-ish. That is the exact center. Yep. And so then I'm going to turn on the proportional editing, and I'm going to hit G to grab and Z to move on the Z plane. And I'll just drag up, and then I'll roll my mouse wheel to get this circle bigger and bigger. If for some reason you drag up and your whole thing moves in a weird way, that might mean your circle is bigger than your screen. So you just need to roll your mouse wheel down. So I'm just going to kind of bring this up to create a bit of a volcano landmass, something like this. There we go. Now I'm going to grab I'm going to keep that top one selected, and I'm going to hit G to grab. And this time I'm going to roll my mouse wheel down, hit Z to lock it on the Z plane. And then I'll just kind of pull this down like that, just to create the opening of my volcano. Looks pretty good. Now I'm going to right click, shade smooth. And this is where we're going to start. Now, I want to probably add a little bit more detail. So I'll just grab a few bits and just kind of sculpt some. Nothing too much. We're gonna use a displacement modifier in a minute to really add in detail. But just to break it up some initially so it's not so perfect would be good. So we'll just do that real quick. There we go. So I've brought down one side of my volcano opening, and I've lifted up the other to kind of give it a side opening section like this. I might bring this in a touch as well. All right, great. Now we're going to break this up even further with a displacement modifier. So I'm going to come over to my wrench, and I'm going to click Add Modifier. And first, I'm going to throw down a subdivision surface to give myself some more geometry. I'll hit 2 on that to subdivide it even further. And then I'll come down here and I'll click Displace, and I'll click New on the Displacement tab to create a new texture. And then I can click this little button, which will jump me to the Texture tab. So it's the same as clicking here. You can do either one. And with this one, I'm going to switch it from type, image, or movie. I'm going to select clouds, and then I'll create this noise pattern. I might crank the size up a bit. Oh, I don't know, maybe keep it whatever. It doesn't really matter just yet. Go over here and we'll bring the strength down. And you can see what it does is it's just going to break things up a little bit. I'm going to hold down the Shift key and drag my mouse. That will allow me to move in smaller increments. And that gives me a really nice look. I might drop my subdivision surface down. Actually, no, it looks pretty good like that. I think that's great. Excellent. All right, cool. Now, what I might do as well is I'm going to grab the outer edge by holding down Alt and selecting these. And I'm just going to hit E to extrude and scale this out. Turn off subdivision surface. Scale this out. Just give myself a little bit more room. And then I'll take Control R to get my loop cut tool and roll my mouse wheel just to create a bunch of loop cuts. And then I'll click just so there's some mesh all through this, like so. Now we've got this nice landscape. Excellent. All right, let's go ahead and set up a camera so we can kind of work towards a certain angle. I find that's really helpful. So I'm going to hit Shift A, create a new camera, and I'll hit 0 on my number pad, and I'll open up my side panel with the in key, or you can just click on the tiny little arrow that lives right there. Come to the View tab, and we're going to click Camera to Viewport. So Lock Camera. Click on Lock Camera to Viewport. Now, a great tip is if you right-click on this and click right here, Add to Quick Favorites. If you hit Q in your viewport, you can get your Quick Favorites menu. Anything you put there is ready to go. So I like to keep my Lock Camera to View in my Quick Favorites. All right, let's pick our angle here. And I'll go ahead and click on the Camera tab, Viewport Display, and let's turn Passport 2 all the way up to darken the outside to help us focus on our image. And let's take the focal length down to something like 24. So it's a bit of a wider angle lens. I'll get a nice low angle look and just pick a cool spot here for our camera. It looks pretty good. I might take my camera and actually I'll go up to my printer icon here to change the dimensions of my frame. I'm going to make this cinematic. I'm going to go for a 2:3:5 ratio, which is the ratio for cinema screens. So to do that, I'm going to type in my height, which is 1080, and then I'll multiply that by 2.35. And that gives me 2538, which is the width that it needs to be the 2:3:5 ratio, if that makes sense. All right, I'll just readjust my camera a little bit. Somewhere like this. That's pretty good. And great. I'm going to go ahead and untick lock camera to view, and then I can zoom in a little bit to expand my view. And I might go back into edit mode. And now that I've got all this stuff, I might just select a couple of these vertices on this outer rim here and turn proportional editing back on and hit grab Z and just drag them up a bit just to get a nice frame. Another good thing to do is if you click up here, you can hide everything and still control what's going on. So that's a nice way to work. Even grab vertices that you're not able to see and just sculpt things out a bit. Okay, so I've got my volcano or my rock spout thing that I'm going to use. Now let's start thinking about the environment and the materials, and we can start breaking things down. I'm going to go ahead and take this. I'll rename this by double clicking it and type volcano. And I'm going to add in some environment to my volcano. But first, I'm going to switch over to rendered view. So I'm going to go to Eevee. I'll turn on ambient occlusion, bloom, and screen space reflections, and I'll turn on rendering there. Now, we don't have anything yet because there's no lights in our scene, but I'm going to add an HDRI. Now, a great place to get HDRIs is at HDRI Haven. Rebranded as Polyhaven. If you go check that out, they've got a ton of amazing stuff over here. One of my favorite parts of the HDRIs. We can find really cool ones here. They're all free to use, and you can join their Patreon to help support what they're doing. So I really recommend it. Go check it out. I want to get something that's like a sunrise, sunset HDRI, and I'm going to get something like maybe this one, or this one's quite nice. Just something with a bit of sunset colors. Let's see. What do I want? I'll go for this one. I think this looks quite nice because I'm getting lots of nice color in the sky. So I'm going to click on that, and we don't need anything too big. Actually, we just need to get something that's really only 1K is all we need. There's lots of options here, but 1K is all we're going to need for this. I'm going to go ahead and download that. Now in Blender, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to switch to my shader editor, and I'll switch from object to world mode. And I will come here and I will go Shift A, and I'm going to search for an environment texture. And I will open and navigate to that environment texture that I just downloaded. I'll just select the environment texture that I just downloaded. And then I'll plug the color into the color. And I'll also make sure that the color space is set to linear. There's a lot of different ways we could go. I could set this to filmic log and then turn my strength down. But that's not going to look good linear. Now I'm going to turn my strength down, right down, just so it's like barely going. I want it to kind of be like a bit of a night scene almost. And I'm going to hit Shift A and type in texture coordinate node to get the texture coordinate node. And I'll just plug the generated in, which is the default vector that's always being used by Blender to place a texture. So that's why nothing changed. And then I'm going to Shift A and type in mapping, and I'll drop a mapping node down. And this will allow me just to rotate this around to get a really nice angle and something that looks good. That looks pretty nice. Now I'm going to come back to my camera. I'm just going to tilt up a little bit on my angle just to frame just the mouth of that volcano a bit better. Okay, cool. Now I want to take my volcano and I'm going to create a new material, and I'll call this volcano as well. And I'll switch from my world to my object shader. Here we go. Now, first thing I want to do is actually, I want to kind of flesh out this scene a little bit because I want to see how all of this material is going to play out across lots of different objects. And I'm going to have this one material on everything, okay? Let's start off by making a bit of a rock material, all right? So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to go Shift A, and we're going to use a Musgrave texture. And I'll drop this here. We're also going to use a Voronoi texture. And I'm going to go to color ramp and I'll drop it here. And let's take a look at these. Now, the Musgrave, I'll plug this straight into the emission, which will allow us just to see it purely as it is. I'll drop the scale down a little bit. I'll turn my detail up. We don't see anything happen yet, but when you drop the dimension, you start to get a lot of rocky looking detail. We can refine that. That looks pretty good, actually. And then let's plug in the Voronoi texture into the emission as well. And let's drop down to, instead of F1, let's go to in-sphere radius and drop radius into the emission. Let's have a look at that. It's going to give us these nice kind of like plates. Let's try distance to edge. Plug that into the emission. Perfect. Now we're going to get these nice cracks. This is actually going to look quite nice. Now these cracks are all a little bit too regular, so I want to kind of break them up a little bit. So I'm going to do something special to this one. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to get a texture coordinate node. And I'm going to get a mix RGB shader node, or not shader, mix RGB node. And then I'm going to grab a noise texture. And I will take the generated, which is what it's already using by default. I'll plug it into the color, and I'll take the factor or the color, doesn't matter, from the noise texture and plug it into the second one. I'll turn this right down. So it's just, in fact, I'll turn it off to 0, so it's not doing anything yet. And I'll take the color and I'll plug it into the vector. And the reason why color can go into vector is because vector is asking for 3 numbers, which represent the X, Y, and Z coordinate. Color gives 3 values, the red, green, and blue values. So that's why they're kind of interchangeable. It can interpret colors as coordinates. So that's how we can do some cool stuff. Now, if I turn this up a little bit, you'll start to see that my cracks distort based on the shape of this noise. So I can turn this right up, right? The higher this goes, the crazier these are going to get. So we get these nice kind of crazy patterns. I'll just find a nice point where they're, pretty irregular. I'm going to take my color app and I'm going to drop this in right here. And what I'm going to do is actually drag the white really close to the black. So we get this nice definitive edge. And I might even take the detail up on this. So this noise. So we get like really fine cracks going on. Maybe even turn the roughness up a bit. There we go. Now I want to mix these two together because I want this one to be mixing with this one. So I'm going to take another color ramp to plug this one in. I'll drag this back out so it's pure gray. It's a nice even gradient. And then what I want to do is just make a little bit more room. I'm going to mix these two together with a mix RGB node. This time I'm going to set it to multiply. And I will bring these together. I don't think it really matters which one they're in. I'm going to turn this all the way up. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this one and I'll bring it off black a little bit. I'll bring up to kind of a gray color and I'll leave this one at black. So this is the one that's going to be the darkest. And that multiply will really push those darks into a really dark spot right there, wherever they get close to those cracks. So there we go. That's kind of a cool look. Okay, now let's drive all this into a bump node. So let's go here and type in bump and let's plug this color into the height. And it's going to use this as a height map. And I'll plug this into the normal. And let's go ahead and unplug the emission. Now I'm going to take the roughness down on my rock to make it a little more reflective. So it'll actually pick up some of that color from the sky. And I'll turn my specular up as well. And you can see it's really starting to catch that light in a really, really nice way. Don't want to go too far with the roughness. All right, great. Now we might use this as well to drive some color. So I'll grab another color ramp. And this is going to be the color of our rock. So I'll take this system, plug it in here, and I'll take this and I'll plug it into base color. Now this will accentuate things even more because it's just straight up taking this and plug it in here to the visual values. But now what I can do is I can take this black and I can make it a little more of a light gray and kind of pick maybe a touch more of like a reddish color. And I can start playing with what this looks like aesthetically. Now I might take a light in this scene as well, just so we can have a little bit more of something. I'll do a sun lamp And I'll just rotate it around and find maybe a nice angle that's behind it. And I might take the color and kind of match the orange of the sunset. So I've got a little bit more going on. I can expand the angle to get the light to wrap a little bit. And I might even turn it down some. You can find just a nice point. We might rotate that around a little bit more later. But we can even Shift D, duplicate it, rotate on Z, and bring it around again to have a secondary one off to the side, and maybe make this one a bit more of a blue to kind of match the blue tones there in the sky. And then we can turn this one right down. So it's a very subtle color hit, which looks quite nice. Okay, so we've made some rock. Now let's make some lava. How are we going to do that? Well, there's a couple of things we need to do. We need to create a rivulet kind of shader with these rivers of lava that are streaming down. And we also need to have a way of masking it a bit so they kind of dissipate as we get further away from the mouth of the volcano. I also want to put a bit of a focal point in this volcano. So I'm going to stick a light up inside there. So I'm going to just do that now. I'll go into edit mode and I will just select these vertexes up here. Shift S, cursor to selected. That'll put the cursor right up there in between all of those vertexes. Now I can leave edit mode and Shift A and create a point light. And I can turn that back off. Now that point light is going to be right up inside the mouth of the volcano. And I can turn this up a bit and give it maybe like a deep red color like that. Something that's going to be like our a lava. I might turn it way up. Let's go all the way up to 1,000 and just sit it right in there. That looks quite nice. Okay, now let's get this other shader going. Now this whole system is working really well for us. We don't really want to mess this up. But we're actually going to create this lava system all within this same shader. So we're actually going to be plugging it all into the same principled BSDF. So what we're going to do is we're going to take all of these guys and we'll actually just take this whole group right here. We're going to disconnect it from the material output. I'm just going to drag it down here off to the side. And I'm going to create a new principled BSDF. And this is just so I can focus now on the second part of my material. All right, so we're going to start off with I think we're going to Musgrave as well. Creates a nice broken up pattern. So I'll plug the height into the emission just like we did before. And let's turn the detail up and the dimension down. And the scale, I might bring the scale just a little bit to like 1.8 or 2, something like that. Now we want to stretch this thing out along the whole surface, right, of the object. And we're going to do that by using the UVs. So I'm going to come over to my UV editor. And if I enter edit mode and hit A to select all, I'll select all the faces on this object and they'll appear, all the corresponding UVs will appear here. Now you can see this is all laid out just like we originally modeled it, which was just as a flat plane. But I want to lay this out a little bit differently, right? Because what I want to do is I want to be able to stretch and move the UVs so that I can change the shape of this noise. So if I hit A to select all and then like S to scale and Y, you can see actually first nothing's going to happen, right? So we're not actually doing anything with these UVs. So we need to start using the UV as the vector to tell Blender how to place this texture. I'm going to Shift A, texture coordinate, and I'll take the UV and plug it into the vector. All right, so now what's going on here? We can see that this is mapping correctly, but all this is really stretched out. Well, that's because we extruded all these vertices at the end after we created the plane. So it didn't actually create new UVs for this. So we need to unwrap this whole system again. Okay, so to get the stretching that we want, what we're gonna need to do is first pop into the top view. So I'm going to jump over to top view by hitting the 7 on my number keypad. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into edit mode, make sure I can turn on my overlays. And I'll hit A to select all. And then on UV, I'm going to click UV and project from view. And that's going to project a view of my UVs straight down, matching the exact layout of everything looking from above. Okay, and we did that just because we did those extra extruded bits on the side, so those stretched the UVs and it wasn't quite even. So now we've got that. Now what I want to do is I want to come right here and I'm going to select, actually I'll just try and make sure you get transparent view on. I'll select that the single vertex is at the base of my the pit of my volcano. And then I'll hit Control Plus to expand my selection up until I've got this interior bit right up in here. Now, what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to jump into my camera view. Actually, I'll come out of my camera view. I'll look up a little bit so I can see it all. Turn off transparent view and turn off show overlays so I can really see this noise pattern play out on my object. And I'm going to turn on proportional editing, and you can see that I've got the UVs selected that are for the inside of my volcano. And I'm just going to hit S to scale, and I'm going to roll my mouse wheel and just get it to the point where I'm stretching just the mountain UVs such that I'm getting these like trails. So you can see I've got these nice kind of like flowing trails of color. Now I can really push this, right? I could go super extreme with it, roll my mouse wheel out, and start to get some very interesting shapes playing out across my object. And I'm just going to do this until I can find something that looks cool. I'm basically going to just continue to play with the scale and the size of my proportional editing until I get something that feels like a real flow. And now I might grab some other bits. And I'm still in edit mode, even though I've got my overlays turned off. So I can hit C to go into brush selection. And you can see down here that I'm getting UVs selected. I've got this mode turned on as well, the two arrows that basically syncs up the selection mode between the two. So if I select something here, it'll select it here. If I select something here, it'll select it on my model as well. So I can see how things correspond. Now I'm just going to select some bits and do the same thing with proportional editing, scale them around, and just kind of get some cool looking shapes. I'll turn off my overlays so I can actually see how this is behaving. All right, cool. So you can see by doing that, I can create some really interesting shapes with the UVs. Now, these are going to serve as the flow of my lava. So now that I've got this basic white pattern, I can also go in and add a little bit of detail and dimension to it to break it up even further. But I want to not break it up too much because I want to have these like nice thick kind of rivers of lava. So I'm going to find a nice kind of in-between point, something like this, I think. Also check the scale and get different looks with different scales. Yeah, I'll go for something like this. All right. The next thing I need to do is I need to kind of mask it off. So I want it to fade away as we leave the top of the volcano and travel down. To do that, I need to use a gradient texture. So let's have a look at the gradient texture. I'll take the color and plug it into the emission. And I will take a texture coordinate node, drop it here, and let's actually pop out of our camera and have a look at what's going on. You can see that we've got a gradient from this side to this side, black to white. Now, I want it to be top down. I don't want it to be going like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the object coordinate and I'm going to pipe it into a separate X, Y, and Z into the vector. And I'll take the Z and I'll pipe it in. And what this is going to do is this is going to basically allow the gradient to function where it's bright up high on the Z plane and it gets darker the lower it goes. So you can see we're getting this like highlight for all the elevated areas. Now I can affect this further with a color ramp. So I can drop a color ramp in here, and this will allow me to change where that fall off point happens. So I'm going to bring it down just a little bit and I'll end it kind of right about there, I think. Now, let's break it up. Let's make this an irregular mask as well. So I need to introduce some noise into this vector for this gradient texture, just like we did before. So I'll grab some noise. I'll grab a mix RGB and I'll drop it here. And I'll take my factor into the second one here. And I will drag this right down until we get just a little bit. And then I'll take my scale up. You can see it starts to break up everything, and I'll turn my detail up and my roughness up as well. Actually, I'll bring my scale down, I think. And then I'll raise up the dark point so that it's a bit higher. As you can see, as we mix this in, it's going to kind of push it downwards into the scene, which is okay. That's going to be cool as well. But this will give us just a little bit more of an interesting pattern. All right, now let's use this white and black gradient that we've created to mask out these rivulets that we've made. I'm going to grab all this and bring it over to here. So I'm going to grab a mix RGB, drop it here, and we will use multiply. And I'll put the height into here. Again, it doesn't matter if it's the top or the bottom, and I'll combine them. And now you can see what's going on is that this is actually now masking out. Now I can also change this from linear to ease. That'll make it an even softer transition. All right, now we're going to use this to now drive something else. We're going to drive some emission, which is going to be glow. But I also want to use this to kind of clean a few things up. Actually, let's just go ahead and switch. So I'm going to get rid of this principled BSDF now. We're going to start introducing this into our main one. So I'm going to plug this one back into my material output. Now I'm going to create a color ramp, and this is going to be the color of our lava. I'll keep the base at black because I want the emission to be black, nothing. I don't want it to be shining wherever we have black in this system that we've just made. Wherever we have white in this system, though, I want to use a bright red, or maybe a little bit of an orange. This will be our lava color. So I'll plug that into the factor, and I'll take this color and stick it into the emission. And now you can see we're getting this bright, glowy red stuff flowing down there. Now I'm going to turn my strength up as well. And with bloom turned on, I'm going to get a bit of bloom on that. And that looks really nice. Now, what we can do is we can use these systems now to kind of affect the way this lava looks. So I can pull back. Now, one thing that might look cool is actually to use the Musgrave texture that we've created for the rivulets and actually use this to be the noise for breaking up our gradient. It might actually stretch out a bit better. So let's try it. Yeah, that actually works a bit better because now it's pulling out in streaks, which is what we want. It looks a bit better than just pulling out in straight up noise. So I'll just find a nice little sweet spot, maybe where I get a few glints of the stuff. And that looks really, really strong. Okay, now I can get a really nice final effect by just pushing this gradient right up with this color ramp. So it's right up at the top and then increasing the mix factor of this noise that we're bringing in. And that will allow me to get these really nice streaks that kind of break away and fall off down the sides of the volcano. I think that looks really, really cool. All right, let's go ahead and finish this project out with some smoke because you gotta have smoke in a volcano, right? So I'm gonna select my point lamp, which is right up there inside my volcano, and I'm gonna hit Shift S, cursor to selected. I'm gonna go ahead and hit Shift A and create a UV sphere, and I'll just scale it up a little bit and stick it down right inside the volcano. Just make sure it's not peeking out the sides. Just kind of fill up the mouth of the volcano there. And then I'm going to select Object, Quick Effects, Quick Smoke. And then I'm going to take my domain here and I'm going to scale it and grab it up and expand it a little bit so it fills up the space a little bit more. And I'm going to come over here to my Physics tab and I'll just scroll down. I'll turn on noise. I might turn up my divisions up a little bit to, let's say, 64. I'll just double it. And I'm going to turn my cache from replay onto all. This is a much more stable way of previewing your smoke. And I'll click Bake All. Now it's rising a little bit slow. So I'll come over to my sphere and I'll set my initial temperature to 2. And I will go back to my smoke domain and I'll free all and bake. Now, after I've run that simulation, I'm just going to move my domain up because once you've baked it, you can actually change its position and scale and such. So I'm just going to position it a bit better in my scene, make sure it is kind of really coming out of the volcano. That looks pretty good. Jump back into my camera. And now I want to make sure I've got a few things set on. I'm going to make sure my tile size under volumetrics and my render settings is set to 2. That gives me some really good resolution. And then I'm going to turn on volumetric shadows, and that's going to help create some nice shadowing in our smoke. Now we're not getting a lot here, and that's mostly because of not having enough light in the scene. So I can actually move this light around until I get it in front of the smoke. And now you can start seeing some of that definition playing out. So I can find a better spot for this. You can also click on the domain and go to the material that's been created for it. And this will give us a chance to play around with the density. You can increase it or lower it, increase the anisotropy, which allows it to kind of catch the light a bit more. So I've just taken my smoke domain and just scaled it up a little bit so it's actually overlapping my mesh some. And I get these nice kind of streamers kind of coming off the sides, which I think looks really kind of cool. Now I could also like duplicate my smoke domain and move it around and put in like a bunch of these, because that's cool. Little geysers. I'm going to click the plus sign on this other smaller one right here. I'm going to click on the little double paper icon on this smaller one over here, just so I can make it a little bit different. I'm going to pull out the anisotropy a little bit on it so the light kind of catches a bit more on it, and might make it a little bit less dense. We can have a couple of little geyser things. I'm also going to take my volcano and I'm going to Shift D to duplicate it. And I'm going to rotate this around, scale it down, and I'm going to position a few of these in my scene like this. And I'm also going to take their material and I'm going to click the double paper icon, and I'm going to just unplug the emission from these. So these are just going to be rock objects, but they're going to have a similar kind of, shape. And what you can do is you can like scale these in all kinds of crazy ways to get interesting shapes that you can use to flesh out your composition. Just make sure that they're, rotated and turned enough that they don't match it anymore. And there we have it, the finished image. Now, as you can see, I've just placed the same volcano object just in the scene and just scaled them up and changed different sizes, scaled it on the Z, squashed some of them down, spread some out, rotated them around on the Z, and just kind of, position them in the scene so that I get this nicer composition. It could be a little bit nicer. There's some bits that aren't great about it, but overall I think it looks pretty good. I'll pop out so you can see the whole thing. But yeah, following this idea, you can actually create some really interesting stuff. Now, does this have some limitations? By twisting and pulling the UVs like that, you can't get consistent motion out of this noise. So some bits are going to look like they're going up, some look like they're going down, depending on how you've played with that UV. But you could always start again if you really want to see this animate and go back to warping those UVs and make sure you do it in a way where they're not going to overlap. As long as they don't overlap, you don't end up with that weird backward forward motion. So if you wanted to have an animated shot, that would be the way to do it. You could play with that a little bit more using your proportional editing modifier. I hope you found this tutorial really helpful and you really enjoyed it. Please don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel to catch all the videos that are coming your way. I've got more tutorials coming every week. So stay tuned, ring that bell to get notifications as well. And I can't wait to see you in the next one. Check out our Discord and don't forget to have a look at the Patreon. I've got hours of extra content over there, along with project files and all kinds of exciting stuff. In fact, you can get this project file if you sign up to Patreon this month or next month. So go check that out. They cycle through every 2 months. Thanks again for watching. I'll catch you in the next episode. See you later. Bye.